Happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Eat, Train, Prosper. Today's Bryan and myself, but before we get into today's episode, I have a question and ask for some of you guys. If you are listening to the podcast, if you enjoy the podcast and you are using the Apple Podcasts app, if you feel like Bryan and I provide sufficient value and you enjoy this, we would really appreciate a review. I'm not even asking for a 5-star review. I'm asking for an honest review on the podcast. Bryan and I, this podcast, how we reach audience, how we get clients, and I think that we try to strive to do our best to provide as much objective, valuable information and our own kind of insight in what we have learned. So if you could take the time, leave us a quick review. Doesn't have to be lengthy by any means. We would both really appreciate it and help the podcast grow, reach a broader audience, and help get this quality information out to more people. With that out of the way, let's jump into today's episode. Bryan, what's going on with you?
I'm cold. If you're watching on YouTube right now, you can see that I am in full winter get up here. I got 3 layers on. I got a hoodie. I got a beanie. Got sweatpants. Got shoes on. It is cold for today. It's 45 degrees outside. And then I think we're going back into the 70s for another week. But definitely getting that little taste of winter here. And let's see, beyond that, I had my minor surgical procedure yesterday. So it's the doctor, I asked him what it would feel like for like the few days afterward. And he goes, you know, when you get kicked in the balls and 5 minutes later, it doesn't really hurt anymore, but you just kind of feel like something's happening down there. And I was like, yep, I know that feeling. And he said, yeah, that's what you're going to feel for about 2 or 3 days. And he's right. That's basically what I feel. Like, it's not actually painful. It's just kind of like a hyper awareness and very much that I don't feel confident like bracing hard and lifting. So it's good that I'm taking these 5 days off. Let's see what else is going on. We just had the awesome episode with the data-driven strength guys last week. And it was so good. I literally went back and listened to the whole thing over the last 2 days. And I love the way they think about things. Like, they have such a good mind for combining strength and hypertrophy. And I just really enjoyed listening to them and loved the input that they had on kind of the ideas around how I could build out my strength phase coming up that I'm going to start on Monday here. And one of the things that they suggested, I think the main thing that I was like super amped on, is the idea of using like a daily single or double and then basing your back off work on that single or double. So just as a refresher for anyone that missed it, their idea was kind of that you would work up to like an RPE 8 for the day, whether that's like a single or a double. RPE 8, about 2 reps from failure. And then you use just either your intuition or some online like calculator and determine what your 1 rep max would be if you had taken that to like the full limit. And then you do 75 or 80% of that for your triples for the day. So that approach is really cool. And I like that because that auto regulates the amount of effort and then fatigue that I'm going to accumulate in the back off sets based on how fresh I feel from going into that top set. So really cool. Definitely going to implement that. Also going to use some of what they talked about regarding doing more sets further from failure for kind of some of the accessory movements. So I'm not talking about like, curls necessarily and push downs, but, pendulum squat, RDL, like still big movers. But instead of, 2 top sets of 8 to 10 reps close to failure, it might be 5 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 6 with 5 reps from failure or something along those lines, using maximal concentric intent. Love that. I've heard a lot about that in the last, few months. And then they really harped on that here, which essentially just means lifting the weight as fast as you possibly can, pretending that every rep is like the hardest rep you're doing. So that's how I lift anyways, but I really love that as a term. And I think that makes a lot of sense as kind of a message to relay to other people. So anyway, I was just reflecting on that and listening to that episode and enjoying my days off as I kind of heal up and prepare for my strength cycle. And then I have a bunch of reflecting to do. So I want to kick it over to Aaron, but I have a few different topics of my last week or two to discuss with you guys after that. But what's going on in your world, dude?
Preparing. We are leaving Salt Lake City in about a month. We're going to go to Arizona, the Scottsdale area for winter. So any listeners out there if you're in the Scottsdale area, want to meet up, get some coffee, lift some weights, I would love to do that. So let me know. Salt Lake's been super, super cool. I really do love it here. And if you asked me if I had to stop traveling, where I would settle down, I would literally just stay here. It's been my favorite place, but the travel life, living out of a suitcase, doesn't leave a lot of room for winter clothes. So we're just not really equipped to do winter somewhere yet. But in the next couple of years, whenever we do stop, I do want to settle back into having seasons in a winter again for sure. So that's kind of the big thing. I have been, like, my neck has kind of been bothering me, like not really so much my neck, but like my traps rhomboid area. So finally I was like, okay, I gotta go get this taken care of. So I was like on the Google, found this place called Rias Altus here in Salt Lake, and this guy named Dylan, and I just like had great reviews. I'm like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna book it and see what happens. It was one of the best like body working sessions I've ever had. Big dude, lifts weights, like, very, very similar to myself. And he put me through a world of pain. And I have like a high physical pain threshold, I deal well with like my long tattoo sessions, everything like that. This was very not pleasurable. And it was my back too. Cause if you're getting a massage done or whatever, like the back can like kind of take a beating compared to like if it was like your quads or hamstrings or calves or something, God forbid. And it was not fun. And he told me, he's like, your rhomboids are a disaster. So it's probably why I've kind of been having some like, back of my neck trap problems when I'm like working too long or something like that. So that was eye-opening. I'm definitely going to try and go back to him. He was booked out like weeks too. So that's how you know a place is pretty good, when they have zero availability for a while. So that was on Tuesday, and I'm still like pretty beat up from that, but gave me some things to do. So I'm pumped about that to really kind of help that kind of settle back in. And then the other thing with me is I will officially start my gut protocol tomorrow. The FedEx product that I had been waiting for finally got to me last Thursday. I needed to run 7 days of that to help with just increase the capacity of liver detoxification, so that when the die-off of things happen, I don't get super crappy feeling, brain fog, really low energy type stuff from all the toxins releasing into my body. So we'll start that tomorrow officially. I'm very, very excited to really just hopefully take care of my like shoddy digestion, really iffy digestion that's really kind of just slowly gotten worse over the couple years. I talked about this 2 podcasts ago, I believe, with all of the international travel, bacterial infections I've gotten and stuff. It's just kind of been like a house of cards really over the last, couple of years. So really just going to prioritize that. Trainings come back to 4 days per week, and just taking that for what it is, and just accepting really that training is going to be at maintenance for probably through the end of the year. And I might make some like, neurological adaptation gains or anything like that, but we're not going to be pushing calories high enough for me for really making true hypertrophy progress, and just understanding that's a trade-off for the gut health thing. The upside is physique-wise. It's responding really, really well. I had a couple new lows, which I dipped into the 180s, which I'm going to be completely honest, I didn't feel great about.
You hate that.
I do not like it. To be completely honest, I don't like being under 200 pounds. But realistically, for me to be at this level of lean, I need to be 192 to 190, or sorry, like 190 to like 193, 194, I think. Maybe 195 if I had this idea of like, what happens if I basically took like the Jeff Alberts approach. I'm going to diet for a really long time, but like have multiple diet breaks and see how much muscle mass I can retain, right? That might be probably not next year, maybe a 2-year type of an experiment type thing to see how much I could retain if we really just kicked it out and did a bunch of refeeds and stuff. But I just don't like seeing the 180s, because it makes me start questioning whether I'm, how much muscle I'm losing type of thing. So it admittedly is a bit of that like bigorexia type thing with me. But what I wanted to say is, because with my shift in my nutrition periodization in the gut protocol, we just have to bring carbohydrate down, right? So carbohydrate comes down, and what do we do to keep calories the same? fat comes up. And historically, I have just really always followed a lower fat diet because I just prefer palatability, carbohydrate. And then I don't enjoy a lot of like fatty meat and stuff anyway. So it was really just kind of very conducive for my lifestyle anyway. Excuse me. So now with that kind of shifting, fats come up. I'm really kind of like, okay, what can I do to get all these fats in? Like most days it's around like 120, my fats. So I'm like putting olive oil on my vegetables and rice at the end of the night. And fortunately I found this incredible olive oil. I haven't shared it on the podcast yet. It's at Whole Foods. It is like an Italian, herbs infused olive oil. So it's like a really quality, like yellow, super flavorful olive oil. And then they soak a bunch of herbs in it too. So it's fantastic. I've never been like a huge olive oil person, but this is absolutely fantastic. It's at Whole Foods. They also have a spicy one with like chili peppers, which I do enjoy, but has less utility, I would say. So I've been not like soaking, but I've been putting like 10 to 15 grams of olive oil with like my dinner to round it stuff out. Brazil nuts, walnuts. I would like to do avocado, but I'm going low FODMAP because of the digestion, right? So I don't want a bunch of fermentable saccharides and stuff that are going to not play nicely with the whole gut protocol thing. So unfortunately, no avocados for a little bit, but it has been interesting just shifting my diet and then figuring out like, oh shit, I need another 20 grams of fat and it's 9 p.m. Like, where can I get this from type of deal? So chia seeds, ground flaxseed, been doing some different smoothie type things with vegetables just to get things in. So it is different, but physique wise, my body has responded positively, which has been interesting. Now, granted, lower carbs come down, you're going to drop some glycogen, and that's probably why I've been dipping between like down from like the 192s into the 190s, 189s, but it has still been interesting is just shifting over has responded positively for my physique. Just today, my coach told me, he's like, dude, you're literally ready to step on stage for a men's physique show. Like you need to do it. I'm not going to, but
yeah, men's physique, you can be at that like 8% body fat range. And then to do bodybuilding, you really got to just get those hams and glutes in, which is my problem.
Yeah. And I mean, to be completely honest, I don't like the smell of the competitions. Like when Jenny did it and I went, the smell was like overwhelming for me. So I couldn't imagine. It's something I eventually will do, but I just don't want to do it right now. I have zero interest. I have a lot going on. But that's kind of been the biggest update from my week this week. What about some of the other things with you, like the N1? How cool is the N1 HQ? How was the video demo? Anything you can share with us there?
Yeah. So that was the last couple days. On Monday and Tuesday this week, I spent a little bit of time up at N1 with Kassem, and on Monday, I just went to train with him. It was just kind of like a cool experience to be invited up there, and he was hitting shoulders and arms. So I was like, yeah, I'm doing upper body as well. So I did shoulders and arms with him. For anyone that followed my story, I put it all on the story that day. So it was a very interesting setup to the way that I usually would do like a shoulder arm focus day, because he started us with the first circuit, had 3 movements in it. First one was a lateral delt, second one was a front delt, and the third one was a rear delt. And we just kind of rotated through them. We did 5 sets of each. So it was 15 sets just of that first sequence, but it increased from like a warm-up set on the first set, and then basically the last set or 2 was, within 2 reps of failure to failure or whatever. So there was like, 1 or 2 hard sets for each movement. But my shoulders were like blown up by the end of that just because of the volume. Like I'm not used to doing 15 sets of shoulders, even though it was like 5 lateral, 5 front, 5 rear. There was just a lot of blood flowing there.
What was the rep ranges about?
Yeah, so we pretty much hung out in the 6 to 10 or 12 rep range. Like the earlier warm-up sets were like 10 or 12, but they were still super easy. Mm-hmm. And then maybe like our second to last set, I think I did 8 reps, a rep shy of failure, and then the last set I think I did 7 reps to failure with like 3 partials or something like that. So mostly like 6 to 10 or 12 rep range, and it wasn't supersetted. Like it was like I go, then Kassem goes, then I go, then Kassem goes. So it was like a good like minute and a half between sets, and we just kind of rotated through like that. That was only part A, and then we did part B, and it was more shoulders. So we did a Y raise. Then we did a behind the body cable curl. We did a overhead cable tricep extension. We did an anterior delt press, and we did a prone rear delt dumbbell row. So now we were up to like, shit, that was 3 more exercises for shoulders, and then there was 1 for biceps and 1 for triceps. And we did 3 rounds of that one, where the first round was a warm-up, and then there was 2 work rounds. So that's like a significant amount of volume. That was pretty much all that we did on the program that day, and then I added in a little bit of flat dumbbell press and a little bit of lat-focused row so that I could complete my final upper body workout before going in for my little surgery. So I smashed my upper body on Monday, and then on Tuesday, I went in, and the point of Tuesday was for me to do some Olympic lifting stuff with the Intech equipment. So part of the deal that Cass made with Intech was that when they would give them this free equipment to use at the N1 HQ, and Cass would compose and edit a video essentially promoting the Intech barbell and bumper plates. So I came in and did some snatches, some cleans, some pulls, some deadlifts, and maybe one other thing, RDL, I think. And did all that with the bumpers, dropped a couple bars. He got a couple cool shots of like the plates bouncing. And I'm pretty sure that entire like 2 hours of time I spent is going to get condensed down into like 3 1-second clips that are like shot between something else, you know, but it was a cool experience. And I really hadn't done any Olympic lifting for 4+ years. So rusty at first, like it felt so off. My footwork was awful, but the worst thing was my mobility. Like, I had not sat in the bottom of like an overhead squat, like at rock bottom with weight over my head in so long. And I thought it was going to be my shoulders, but it was my upper back that felt like really limited and tight in getting into that position. So I had to essentially warm up for like 30 minutes, and it reminded me so much of why I hated CrossFit, or not why I hated CrossFit, but why I'm glad that I don't train CrossFit anymore, because I always hated that 30-minute period of time where I felt like I had to warm up just to be able to hit the positions that were required for the day, you know? And it really, that's what it took. Like I had to do like banded arm stretches, overhead banded stretches, like banded hip stretches, like, you know, adductor and abductor and like all the different things just to like rotate my body through these positions. And then, you know, sit at the bottom with an empty barbell, sit at the bottom with 55 pounds, do a snatch balance, like all of the different progressions that you go through trying to prepare your body for the loads for the day. And my CNS was shot, dude. Like all I did was snatch 95 for some triples and clean 135 for some triples. But by the end of the 2 hours, I was like, man, like crushed city, you know? So on my own, just because I knew it was going to be my last workout before Wednesday's surgery procedure, I ended up adding in some weighted hip extensions and some dumbbell RDLs, and then I did a couple sets of that glute press. The glute press machine that he has, the Atlantis glute press, is so rad. It's like a leg press, but it's on a pendulum, so it really hits the glutes perfectly. And then for anyone that saw my story as well, you would have seen me using the Atlantis hip extension machine, which is just a monster. This thing is so large, and you can adjust. So you can adjust the height both ways. So you can adjust how far the pad goes out, but also how far the hip pad comes up. So I was able to adjust it so that I could literally extend my arms fully with a barbell and plates in my hand, and it still didn't hit the ground. So that made for like a really cool way to load a hip extension, because at home when I do them, I'm holding dumbbells and they're like clenched to my chest, and like my biceps are getting sore just holding them, you know? So this was so much better. I mean, this is like the Cadillac of hip extension machines. And so overall, super cool. I'm glad I got to connect with Cass and kind of begin to build a relationship with someone that I respect a lot in the industry and happens to be 10-15 minutes away from me, which is really just a huge stroke of luck.
Yeah, is the gym in like the Boulder area?
Yeah, it's actually in Gun Barrel, so it's between Boulder and Longmont.
Okay, I know exactly where that is. That's really, really cool. Did he say anything about when they plan on doing any seminars or anything like that once they're up?
Yeah, they're already sold out October, November, and December.
Are you shitting me?
No, so there's a seminar, the 5 days, October 9th to 14th coming up, and that's sold out. There's one in November that's sold out, and December's sold out. So
I've been like looking for them, and I'm like, man, maybe they're just not having any. And I have no idea how these have just snuck under my nose. I've been
Rachel Gregory just hit me up and said she's coming to the one in October, so somehow she knew about it. Maybe you need to get on their email list.
Yeah, son of a bitch. I'm so pissed right now.
Yeah, maybe they'll open up some more spots. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that was super cool. That was all at like the tail end of what has been going on with me the last 2 weeks, because we didn't really get an update with having Zach and Josh on last week. But my diet ended. I think I alluded to that the week before, or even in the podcast with Josh and Zach. The diet's over. I had my photo shoot on Sunday, the 22nd of September, I believe. And I think it went really well. I actually just got all the photos back and put a few of them up on my story late last night. So overall, like I couldn't be happier with the way that the peaking process went. I think that it was better than the prior year. And then when you look at the pictures comparing similar poses from 2020 to now, I think you see significant difference. And I don't know that it's necessarily a 1-to-1, just because I think I did peak slightly better this time. But I think that the differences are significant enough that it's obvious either way. And to be completely honest, like, I think the changes were more significant than I even hoped for, at least in my back picture. Like the back one, I remember looking at the first back picture that I took last year and being like, wow, that's pretty solid. Like my back and shoulders look good. And then I look at the one this year and I'm like, oh, the one last year was awful. Like my delts had no development, and like there's no definition in my rhomboids and teres, and it's just nuts.
What was your weight difference between the two photos?
So the lowest I ever got was 3 pounds lower this year, but on the actual day of the shot, I was 1 pound lower than where I was last year.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the photos, yeah, I mean, you got to put them up on a post because they're obviously gone in the story or whatever. Maybe just the back one comparing them. But yeah, I was very, very shocked at the difference. It seemed very obvious to me, just a drastic improvement in that year. So that's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's nuts, to be honest. I think it's more improvement than I made the prior year or like the year before that. So yeah, there's something to, I guess, the way I've been training and the execution of the movements and all these like crazy things that we're talking about on here that seem so nuanced, and sometimes I even think they're silly, you know, like Helms comes on and he's like, dude, if you're squatting and you're going down and you're coming back up, like your quads are working. But like that's how I squatted forever and nothing ever happened, and then I start squatting with this other type approach. And not to say that Helms is wrong in his assessment, because he knows a lot more than I do, but for me, there is something to squatting this way, and I wouldn't be surprised if that carried over to other people.
I would agree with that. I mean, same thing. I think maybe it's a little bit different because we have that we were those people who squatted all the time, and like our legs just our quads, I guess I should say, what we really cared about, just didn't get the stimulus, or like a subjective stimulus, I guess you should say. And since we've switched, like my legs look much better than they used to. Same with yours. I'm squatting significantly less weight, less load. I think it may be just a little bit individualized, I suppose.
For sure, yeah. But I mean, there's nothing, like, you can't go wrong with squatting in a manner that gets more ankle and knee flexion. I mean, if you prioritize that in the way that you're squatting, it's gonna help. And then, I mean, I guess it's my back that we were talking about, so it's crazy that I just somehow moved that into quads, but because I'm always thinking about quads. But even in the way that I'm training my back, I mean, like the things I've done this year that have been different are that I've added partials in. For the last like 4 months, I've been doing partials on the last set of almost every back movement that I do now, and I stopped using momentum in my back movements. I literally just am static the entire time, and I know how to grind through reps. Like, I actually think it was funny watching you do your row on your story yesterday, because you didn't actually have a rep that slowed down, but you could tell that it was getting really hard, you know? And I finally like got that skill of like learning how to grind through like a back rep, and somehow I feel like that's had a positive impact too. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, especially because they're that shortened overload position with the back. Like, I mean, if you don't get it, for a lot of people at least, if it's not moving well in the beginning from like a velocity standpoint, you're probably not going to make that rep. But because you just never are pulling quite. I don't want to say hard, but I guess it's just different, is what I'm saying.
You just get stuck with your mechanical advantage lessons as you get higher up. You just get stuck. Like, I don't know what to say. You get there and you're like, either I use momentum or I'm just not making the rep.
Yeah.
So yeah, since the diet ended, I have eaten a lot of food in the last week. And I know my actual body weight scale number isn't reflective of what my body weight would be right now if I stopped eating like a donkey. But I weighed in at 189 this morning, so that's about 5 pounds up in a week. So I'm pretty sure once I dial that back, I'll lose a few pounds there. But I definitely have gained a nice 2 or 3 pounds just in this last week. And I feel good. I'm enjoying food again. I've baked 4 times, and I've eaten cheesesteak and pizza and French fries and all the things that I wanted. And I'm approaching that point now where I'm like, I think I'm good. Like, I've gotten all the things out of my system that I really wanted to, and I think I'm ready to revert back into my off-season satiety tracking protocol, protein grams, body weight, and subjective satiety. And just kind of tracking those on a daily basis and going from there. And then the last thing that I had to talk about was I also had a cool opportunity last week to go up to Fort Collins and train with Alberto Núñez and Brian Miner. And the point of going up there was to train with them and connect, of course, but it was also to use their expert eye as professional natural bodybuilders to kind of give me a realistic assessment in person and be like, yo, here's how much further you would need to go if you wanted to like be really competitive on stage. And they both kind of agreed that it's pretty much the low 170s, which is about what I figured. When I went up there that day, it was a couple days after my photo shoot, so I had already been, carbing up and stuff. So I went up there with a morning weigh-in of 184.8, like 185, something like that. And they thought that I had like at least 12 pounds to go. And then Núñez said that maybe even on like the lower end, I might see like a 169.6 or something. But he's like, that would be before, your peak week where you carb up. And he's like, you would stand on stage somewhere in the like low 170s. So that's about what I thought. And it's also a bit further than I want to go. I mean, maybe it's because I'm on the tail end of a diet, and I just kind of am like, fuck, like I'm just done with this mentally, But getting to 182 wasn't what I would say was like really, really hard, but it wasn't like a walk in the park either. And so I know getting from 182 to 172 or even 170 or whatever it is, like, it's going to be really, really hard, and I am not sure if my life can accommodate that right now. So something for me to think about over the course of the next few months as I eat more food, and then maybe I can get myself back in the mindset. What Brian proposed, because they both, Alberto and Brian both, were like, from the front and like front lat spread, like, you look pretty good. Like, no, you're not stage ready, but like you look pretty good. You have quad separation or whatever. There's nothing going on in my hamstrings and glutes. Like, it's partially because I don't know how to pose them, which is something that would need work. But like, you really have to, I have to get into like a stretched position, like the bottom of an RDL, for you to see definition in my hamstrings. And that's not like what I should be able, I need to be lean enough that I have definition back there without having to go into a complete, stretch position like that. So Brian's suggestion was to do a hamstring and glute specialization cycle for the majority of the next year.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I mentioned to him though was that my hamstrings are getting sore from like the minimal amount of work that I'm doing right now. So I'm doing like 8 to 10 sets a week for hamstrings, which isn't a lot. Actually, maybe it's like 8 sets because I have a little that I put on hamstring day that's actually glutes. So, so I'm probably doing like 8 sets a week of hamstrings. So I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like if I have a session of 4 sets of hamstrings that gets me sore, and then 4 days later I do 4 more sets of hamstrings that gets me sore, like how do I increase hamstring volume? And he brought up something that I actually hadn't considered, but makes a ton of sense, which is that if you don't actually change your hamstring volume, but you decrease volume elsewhere, the hamstrings will receive more of the recovery currency. And so they'll grow and recover faster. And then I might actually find that I can add more volume to the hamstrings by backing off on the other stuff because my body can just recover a little bit better. So that's obviously something that I could consider. And then Núñez brought up that he spent this whole year basically not going above what would be considered like maintenance volume for his quads because he's put a lot of that into his shoulders and arms. And he said his quads still grew. So he's like, you may just find that like even when you reduce volume on your strong body parts, they just keep growing, and you don't even need to worry about them. Like just do enough so that they're not shrinking and they'll take care of themselves, you know?
Another part of it too could be, I mean, the deficit, right? Obviously reduced recovery capacity. When calories come back up, you have more recovery capacity, especially then coupled with reducing volumes in other places. Now you're freeing up more recovery capacity for the hamstrings. You might even be able to increase volume there and remain relatively same amount of sore you are now.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point too. I hadn't really thought of that either. So I definitely need to keep that in mind. But essentially my objective here is to get through my strength cycle without trying to think about prioritizing my hamstrings and just, you know, get out of the hypertrophy mindset for 4 to 8 weeks or whatever it is. And then when I jump back into a dedicated hypertrophy training, probably design some sort of cycle that is going to prioritize hamstrings and glutes kind of along with it.
And I think it's, I mean, with obviously your deadlift, or not deadlift cycle, your strength cycle, you're going to be deadlifting. It's hard to not hit your glutes and hamstrings when you're deadlifting.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely not going to let them shrink. And I have RDLs. So I have deadlifts on one day, I have RDLs on another day, and then I have leg curls on another day. So there's like, hamstrings are going to get hit 3 times a week. It's just going to be with a little bit lower volume than I'm used to doing. So yeah, all of that is cool. I probably won't be getting on stage anytime soon, which is also pretty cool. And overall, like I'm just kind of excited to get into this strength cycle and start eating food or continue eating food and move along from there.
Question for you.
Yep.
Where do you anticipate, and you can tell me obviously if you have zero connection to it, where your body weight is going to kind of shake out or where you really want to go? Or are you just going to be like, you know, I just don't really care?
It's a good question, and I do care. Another suggestion that Bryan had when I was up there with them was he was like, I think if you looked to compete in 2023, he's like, you could literally spend this next year and you could just like go up to the low to mid 190s and then do a quick mini cut back down to the mid 180s. And then he's like, go back up to the low to mid 190s, mini cut back down to the mid 180s. And that was kind of his suggestion because he was like, then you can more or less start your diet like around 190 instead of starting it around 200. And he's like, that 170 number is going to be a lot less daunting if you started at 190 than if you started at 200, which is a great point. I mean, I think, you know, to reference what you said earlier with Jeff Alberts, where the reason he takes these year-long diets with all these diet breaks is because he stands on stage at 172, but he starts at 205 or something like that. So he's got 33 pounds to go. Even if he's losing a pound a week, that's 33 weeks. But then you got a couple diet breaks in there. You have a couple weeks where you're losing only half a pound because you're almost in contest shape. And before you know it, there's a year, you know?
Yeah.
So I think for me, if I could make it a 6 to 8 month diet and make it 20 to 22 pounds instead of 32 pounds, I think that that's a good place to be. But again, like I'm so far removed mentally from even like considering that I think my main objective right now is just not to allow my body weight to get above, I would say 195 would be my cutoff. Like if I start seeing a morning weigh in at like 193, 194, creeping up to 195, then maybe that's a sign to mini cut or that I'm going too quickly or whatever. But as a reminder to anyone that, you know, listened to the podcast last year and leading up to my diet this year, I was able to utilize my satiety tracking method to gain 1/3 of a pound a week. So essentially 1.3 pounds a month over 8 months. That was what I did my off season last year. And so I gained about 12, 13, 14 pounds, something like that over 8 months. And that would be kind of along the lines of what I'd like to do this time. Like I'd love to enjoy the foods and be, you know, allow myself to slowly creep up over maintenance a little bit, but not like I've been doing this last week where I'm probably eating, you know, 5,000 calories a day or something like that.
Probably. Yeah. It's something that I kind of have thought about in the past. I've always been so quick to like, okay, diet's over. I got lean. I did it. Now I want more muscle type of thing. And then, you know, in 3 months, all that hard work dieting to like look cool and finally have that physique you want. It's like you're back to being 13% body
it's like,
fat.
Fuck, I'm fat again.
Yeah. And but the part of it that's kind of, I'm feeling a little bit different this go around is like, I'm not even confident that I'm putting on any more muscle really. It's just like, we know it's such a slow process now of that. Like last year, I went from like 196 up to 207.5. So I put on like 11.5 pounds. How much of that do we realistically think is muscle?
Maybe a pound.
Exactly. So I spent 8 months uncomfortably eating, you know, up to 4,500 calories per day over 8 months to maybe put on a pound of muscle that I hopefully kept when I got back
right,
lean
which
again.
Maybe you didn't. Yeah,
which maybe I didn't.
Yeah.
Realistically, maybe let's say maybe a 0.4 of that pound, I think is probably at the top end realistically.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't know if that's worth it to me right now, you know, to go through like, oh, okay, like I don't really look so good anymore. I'm not really like, I don't feel like great about myself. Not that I feel bad, but like, I mean, let's be clear. You feel probably the coolest when you're leaner. Except like when I get really big, like back when I was like, oh, like over 220, I really liked that because I just liked being large, but everyone else did not like it. Jenny hated it.
I like being smaller. Like I enjoy the feeling of being in the 180s more than I enjoy the feeling of being 200. Like I just feel like on my frame, I walk around almost like I'm like lumbering and I'm heavy and I'm like, my footsteps are heavy, you know? And when I'm at like the mid 180s, I just feel like lighter and like freer. It's hard to describe, to the point that like I'm waiting on my blood work to get back, but it almost wouldn't surprise me if my blood work at 183 when I got it tested, or 184 or whatever I was, is better than it was at 200 pounds, just because I feel better. Like it's like, aside from the fact that I just want to eat more foods and not be so restrictive, like all the rest of my signaling is better at a lower body weight.
I would probably agree with that subjectively. Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree. When I was over 100, kilos up in the 220s, my blood work probably was not very good. Actually, I know it wasn't good because when I got some blood work done, it ironically, thyroid wasn't really great, even though I was obviously eating so much food. That's when I first found out about the whole blood glucose thing. I mean, we're talking back in 2017, 2018 now, but that's when I first had that first kind of, foray into that and learning about it. And I was like, cool, I'm going to test mine. And then I was like, oh shit, this is bad.
Well, you were really big though. I mean, me at 200, I feel like I'm still like 15% body fat.
Yeah, I was probably creeping. I was definitely creeping into the high one teens.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that far apart. Like, yeah, it's just interesting though, because like you usually hear that people, if you're in the 15 to 20% body fat range, that's pretty much healthy range. That's normal. Yeah. It's healthy. Mm-hmm. And then you hear, as you get down into like the 10% or the single digits, like I would say when I got my blood work done just now, I was probably 9 or 10% body fat, something like that. Like, you would think that blood work would be worse in that state, but I don't know. I mean, I guess we just need to see it come back and then we'll know more.
From my understanding, it's when you get like 10 can be pretty optimal health outcomes, especially testosterone levels and stuff like that, so long as calories are restored. Once you get into your 7s and 6s and stuff, you're going to negatively impact hormones and health. You're too lean for, day-to-day life. But I think that 9 to 10%, from a pure, physiological standpoint, not bringing in food psychology, any of that sort of thing, from a pure like body numbers thing. I'm from my understanding, from what I have read on it, from a pure hormones health standpoint, there should be no negative consequences at those levels of body fat for a male, who's obviously active and everything like that.
You wouldn't think that just because I'd been in a deficit for 4.5 months that you would see some decline in like testosterone and other hormones.
100%. But let's say like me right now, right? I did my deficit for 4 months and change, and calories got down to like 2,400 on my high days. Now my calories are at 3,200 on my high days. I'm still the exact same weight. So it's a slower process, but let's say like your blood work, obviously like last week, let's say you go through the recovery diet, you're super, super diligent to not, put on any, let's say you're not having cheesesteaks and pizza and that sort of thing. And it's now 5 months down the road and you're eating 3,400 calories a day and your body weight's, within a pound or so, and you're still approximately 10% body fat. Then it would be Brian, those labs should be pretty good across the board.
Well, I'm really excited to see how it is at the end of my diet in the depleted state, before I began refeeding back up and all that stuff. So we'll see how much worse, if it is even worse, or whether the fact that I feel better maybe has some impact on what my hormones show as well. But I should be getting that back any day now, so I'm sure that we can talk about it next week.
Yeah, we should. The last thing for me today was the end of the ab training experiment. So it took me a couple extra weeks. I put on my Instagram post yesterday, because the first like 2 to 3 weeks, I was just having a hard time finding the movements I wanted to do. I couldn't find the ab wheel at the gym, and then I found it, type of deal. So it was a couple weeks until I actually started training them consistently. I think there's been some benefit. I'm fortunate that my comparisons were pretty close. I was 1 pound exactly within of July 8th when I started it, or when I took those first pictures, and I've been training them like hard, probably much harder than I have in majority of my entire training career. And I've purposely selected movements that I would like take them through flexion and extension under load, right? Like you would train any other muscle. So it's not like I was doing scissor kicks and butterfly bullshit and things like that people do when they train their abs. And I think I saw there was some positive benefit there.
I would agree. I actually think yours did look like you had some change, and I love that you had the similar or same body weight comparisons as well, because my experiment, for many reasons, given the different body weights, the fact that I was in a deficit, there were just a number of extenuating circumstances that may have contributed to the way that I felt underwhelmed by the experiment. But I think that yours, at least for you as an N of 1, provides some good information and has shown positive benefits for sure.
Yeah. So ultimately, my conclusion from is I'm going to continue training them, probably one exercise either on my pull day or my push day or my upper body day like it is now. And then I'll do basically between 4 to, 4 to 6 sets per week. Basically to failure.
Perfect.
The one thing someone did comment was like, oh, if I'm doing like heavy deadlifts and stuff like that, or in squats, like should I? And I mean, it depends maybe. The thing that kind of came to mind, and it's kind of sparked from when Kassem commented on that post you had, when you're doing like squats and deadlifts, it's like an isometric contraction through the movement. You're not taking the musculature through flexion and extension under load. So it's like if you always if you like trained your biceps by like holding from a pull-up bar or something like that. You know what I mean? They're getting load, but they're not getting that full range of motion, flexion and
it's the lengthened position and the contracted position and all of the metabolites that accumulate through that process, and then getting out of the lengthened position and yeah, there's all you have to have dynamic movement to get full hypertrophy. So doing a squat or a deadlift would be like the equivalent of doing a plank, which like will increase your core stability and your strength output, but you wouldn't expect to get abs from doing planks.
Yeah, or like hypertrophy of your abs, which is ultimately the goal, right? I want to make them bigger.
Yeah. Yep. If you just want them to be strong, there's tons of things you can do like deadlift and squat and use them functionally, but like much of hypertrophy work, it's not super functional. I mean, I don't know too many times that you're going to do like a perfectly flexion curl, but you do need to use your abs dynamically to like get up off the floor and things like that. So they do get used, but they get used a lot in like a deadlift in the same way. So Turkish get-ups, another way that's kind of like an isometric way, but very functional, which I would say would contribute more to strength than aesthetics, even though you're moving dynamically through the movement. So exercise selection is important as it is in anything.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of my wrap up. Yes, I will continue training them, but it's for me, it's movements, right? So like the ab wheel, great. The idea you gave me of lifting my knees up on the eccentric was fantastic because it took my reps from like 22 down to like 12 because it's so much harder.
It's so hard. Yeah.
So that one was really great. Obviously, I'm still working on mastering the cable crunch, which is something I avoided for literally like 16 years because I couldn't fucking do it right. That one's been fun. The last thing I want to find is like a leg up under load type one. I have some ideas, but I want to find something in that, and then those will basically be my 3 that I rotate, and then I'm basically good from there.
I think like the hanging knee raise with a dumbbell between your feet is dope, and then using the monkey feet would be like a really good use of that silly piece of equipment that company came up with for hanging knee raises. I think would be awesome.
One I see people do that's much more applicable in like a CrossFit style gym is they'll take like your rack, right? They'll move the J hooks to the ground or like the last hole and then put a band around the J hooks. Mm-hmm. And then you stick your feet between like, the opening in the band and do like single leg raises. And then you have the band tension.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be a shortened range overload movement anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like another one. But yeah, those kind of would, I think, cover my basics. Everything I did was really kind of mid-core and upper in this one and nothing really lower. I think, and that will get you some hip flexor type stuff too. Which
I think rollouts are going to be lower. I mean,
they never felt that way too much to me. And then when I would get sore, it was still kind of that mid position.
I get that deep soreness from those that like goes below my belly button.
Yeah, the rollouts, they're gnarly, but it was a cool experiment. Ultimately I'm happy kind of with the results. And I changed my training philosophy because of it.
Yeah. Cool. I haven't trained abs a single time since I stopped my experiment. It's been over a month now. And I do think I am going to include them again, though. I've just been kind of dilly-daddling and being like, fucking hate abs. I don't want to train these. But I do think I'm going to add them in. And I think it'll be easier because it's like I'm jumping into this strength cycle, right, which is literally 3 days a week. And I haven't trained 3 days a week in a couple of years now. But I remember the last time I did 3 days a week, I was kind of just itching to find stuff to do on the in-between days. Like, I didn't want to do things that would detract from the strength work I was doing because I knew I needed recovery. But back in those days, it was like, I'll just do some intervals on the rower or like something like that. I feel like now would be a great time to be like, okay, I have like a Tuesday and Thursday with no training. I'll just do some like calves and abs and it's not going to affect the shit that happens around it.
Yeah, that would be easy. I mean, it's 5 minutes, it's pretty simple.
Exactly. Cool. Well, that's, I know we both got to bounce here, but I think that was a solid recap on our last 2 weeks.
Yeah. So as always, guys, thanks for listening. If any questions about any future episodes, please send them to Bryan and myself. We'll include some good ones, give you some great context-specific, nuanced answers. And if you could, leave us a review. We would appreciate it. So with that, guys, we will talk to you next week.